The Apache woman was abandoned with her 5 children, and a rancher swore, "Now there are 6 of us." The sun was high in the sky, beating down on their heads, and the heat made every step heavy. She had been walking for hours, perhaps days, and her body ached from exhaustion. But she could not stop. If she stopped, there would be nothing left for her children. Hunger gnawed at their small bellies, and thirst made their lips dry and cracked. Yet she kept moving, because giving up was not an option. She thought about the life they had lost, the home that had once been warm and full of laughter. She remembered the small cabin where they had lived, the fields they had tended, and the songs she used to sing to her children at night. All of that was gone now. The land she had called home had been taken from her, and there was no place left for her people. She had no husband to help, no friends to turn to, and no money to buy food or shelter. She only had herself and her children. That thought was both frightening and freeing. Frightening because the responsibility was so great, but freeing because she had no one else to answer to. She could make her own decisions. Her children, 5 of them, were small but brave. The oldest, a girl of 12, walked beside her mother with a quiet determination, trying to look grown-up even when her legs ached. The youngest, a baby not more than 2, was carried in her mother's arms, sometimes crying and sometimes falling asleep against her chest. The other 3, boys and girls of various ages, clung to her hands or ran a few steps ahead, exploring the dusty road but always returning to her side. She had taught them how to find small plants to eat, how to watch for danger, and how to walk quietly to avoid trouble. Even in this desperate situation, she knew she had to teach them survival. The woman's heart ached not only for herself but for the children. She wondered what the future would bring. Would they find a place where they could rest? Would people be kind to them, or would they face the same rejection that they had already seen so many times? Town after town had turned them away. People had looked at her with suspicion, as if she were dangerous, or with pity, as if she were less than human. Some had thrown stones or shouted cruel words. She had learned to ignore them and move forward. She had learned that survival meant staying strong, no matter what anyone else thought. As they walked, the wind carried the smell of the dry earth and the faint scent of wildflowers that grew in hidden corners of the land. She paused occasionally to let her children drink from a small stream or pick berries that were safe to eat. These small moments of relief gave her hope. They reminded her that even in the hardest times, life could offer small joys. She watched her children laugh at the sight of a butterfly or a bird flying overhead. That laughter, though brief, lifted her spirits and gave her courage to keep going. Nightfall was the hardest part. The woman had to find a place where they could rest safely, away from wild animals and strangers who might harm them. She built small fires to keep them warm and taught her children how to huddle together for warmth. She sang softly to them, telling stories of their ancestors, of brave Apache warriors and wise women who had faced impossible challenges. Her voice was the only comfort they had, and it seemed to wrap them in a protective shield against the harsh world outside. Even with her determination, fear was never far. She worried about illness, injury, and exhaustion. She worried about strangers who might not be kind, about storms that could wash away their path, and about the long, lonely nights that seemed endless. She often stayed awake for hours, watching her children sleep and praying that they would survive another day. Her own body begged for rest, but she could not give in. She could not risk leaving them alone for even a moment. Along the way, she remembered small lessons her own mother had taught her. How to read the signs of the land, how to find water in unlikely places, how to protect children from danger. She used every skill she had learned in her life, drawing on knowledge passed down through generations. It was this knowledge that allowed them to survive when others might have given up. The children looked up to her not just as a mother, but as a guide, a protector, and a hero in their small world. Sometimes, when she felt the weight of despair pressing on her chest, she would look at the horizon and imagine a better place, a place where her children could grow up safe and free. She would picture a home with walls that kept out the wind, food on the table, and laughter filling the rooms. These dreams gave her strength. Even if the journey was long and dangerous, she believed that somewhere there was a life waiting for them that was worth every step. She met other travelers along the way, some kind, some cruel. Some offered water and food, while others simply turned away. Each encounter reminded her that the world was unpredictable, that kindness could appear in unexpected places, and that danger could come when least expected. She learned to judge people quickly but carefully, always weighing the risk of trust against the need for help. Every decision mattered because the lives of 5 children depended on her choices. Despite everything, there were moments of quiet beauty. She taught her children to notice the small things, the way sunlight fell through the trees, the songs of birds in the morning, the shapes of clouds drifting across the sky. These moments reminded them that even in hardship, the world held wonder. She wanted her children to grow up not just surviving, but seeing the beauty in life, even in the smallest ways. The journey was long, and many nights she cried silently when the children were asleep. She cried not from weakness, but from the weight of responsibility and the hope that one day they would be safe. Each tear was a mixture of sorrow and determination. She promised herself that no matter what happened, she would keep going. She would protect them, guide them, and love them with everything she had. Days passed, and the woman and her children continued their journey. Hunger and thirst remained constant companions, but their spirits did not break. The children learned resilience, patience, and courage from their mother. They began to understand that life would not always be easy, but together they could face anything. The bond between them grew stronger with each step, each shared hardship, and each small victory. Finally, as the sun dipped below the horizon one evening, the woman saw something in the distance, a few scattered buildings, a fenced area, and signs of life. Hope surged through her heart. Perhaps this place would offer them safety, food, and a chance to start again. She tightened her grip on her children's hands and led them forward with renewed energy. Every step now carried not just survival, but hope. She had faced the harshest trials and had not given up, and now, maybe, her journey was leading to a new beginning. She did not know what awaited them, but she was ready to face it. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would meet them as she always had, strong, determined, and guided by love for her children. The world had tried to break her, but she had survived. And as she walked toward the lights of the distant settlement, she knew that her story, and the story of her children, was far from over. It was only the beginning of a new chapter, one that held the promise of safety, family, and the chance to build a life worth living. The rancher lived a quiet life on the edge of the plains. His days were long, filled with tending to his cattle, mending fences, and keeping the land in order. He was a man used to solitude, shaped by years of hard work and the vast emptiness around him. His neighbors were few and towns were miles away, so he rarely saw anyone except the traders or travelers passing by. For him, life was about routine, survival, and quiet satisfaction. Yet, despite the peace, there was a lingering loneliness that he could not ignore. He had no family left, no children to laugh around the fire, no partner to share the burdens of life. His heart had grown accustomed to solitude, but a quiet ache remained, hidden beneath the layers of work and routine. One afternoon, as he rode along the edge of his property checking fences and water supplies, he noticed movement in the distance. At first, he thought it might be some wildlife, deer or maybe a coyote. But as he watched more closely, he realized it was a woman and 5 children. They were walking slowly, their bodies tired, carrying small bundles and looking weary from travel. The sun had already begun its descent, casting long shadows across the dry land, and the family seemed out of place, almost fragile against the harsh landscape. The rancher squinted, unsure of what to do. People in the area were often cautious, and travelers sometimes brought trouble or misfortune, intentionally or not. Despite his caution, something about the woman caught his attention. There was a strength in her posture, a determination in the way she moved forward despite obvious exhaustion. He could see the love and responsibility in her actions as she guided the children, making sure none of them fell behind or wandered too far. It was a look he had rarely seen, someone carrying not just themselves, but the weight of several lives on their shoulders. He felt a strange mixture of admiration and concern. The rancher decided to watch them from a distance for a while. He did not approach immediately. He wanted to understand who they were and why they were there. For hours, he observed as the family paused occasionally to rest, to drink from a small stream, or to gather edible plants. The children were quiet at times and playful at others, but the weariness was evident in their slow steps and tired eyes. The rancher found himself thinking about his own life, about how he had spent years working alone, and how different it might have been if he had had someone to care for or to share life with. Night came, and the family disappeared behind a small hill, likely looking for a place to camp. The rancher stayed awake that night in his small cabin, thinking about them. He considered the dangers they might face: wild animals, exposure to the cold, the possibility of being attacked by strangers. The thought of 5 children and their mother, out in the open with no shelter or protection, stirred a deep concern in him. He realized that his quiet life, though safe, could now extend to help these people. It was a choice that required courage, because helping them would change his life forever. The next morning, he saddled his horse and rode slowly toward the place he had seen them. He approached carefully, making sure he did not startle them. As he came closer, he could see the mother's cautious eyes scanning the horizon, the children clutching her hands or staying close by. When they noticed him, they stopped, unsure whether he was friend or foe. The rancher raised his hand in a gesture of peace and called out softly. "Hello," he said. "I mean no harm. Are you all right?" The mother studied him carefully. Her eyes were wary. Trust had become a difficult thing to give after the hardships they had faced. She took a small step forward but did not release her children's hands. The rancher continued slowly, showing that he meant no threat. "There's water and food back at my ranch," he said. "If you need a place to rest, you're welcome to come." The children clung to their mother, unsure of what to make of this stranger. The youngest, a baby, fussed in her arms, sensing her mother's tension. The older children exchanged glances, silently communicating their uncertainty. The mother hesitated, weighing the risk. She had been turned away from towns before, judged unfairly and treated with suspicion. Every step she took now had to protect her children, and she could not afford a mistake. Yet something in the rancher's calm voice, the steady way he approached without rushing or forcing, gave her a glimmer of hope. Finally, after a long pause, she nodded slightly, signaling her cautious agreement. They began to follow him, walking slowly across the plains toward his ranch. The journey was tense. Each step was filled with uncertainty. The rancher spoke quietly to them, telling them about his land, the animals, and the small comforts of the cabin they were approaching. He wanted them to understand that this was a safe place, a place where they could rest without fear. As they walked, the rancher noticed the children's small hands, their tired feet, and the way they leaned on their mother for support. His heart softened even further. He had grown up on the land, used to hard work and self-reliance, but he realized that there was a different kind of strength in this woman. She had carried so much responsibility, protected her children against all odds, and still kept moving forward. He admired her courage and resilience more than words could express. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun had begun to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The rancher led them to a small cabin where they could rest. He brought water and simple food, bread, milk, and some dried meat, and offered it gently. The children sat down cautiously, hungry but shy, while the mother watched him carefully. She was grateful but still unsure. Trust was earned, not given, and she needed to see that he meant what he said. The rancher watched them settle in and finally spoke words that carried more weight than he realized. "Now there are 6 of us," he said quietly, looking at the mother and her children. It was not a boast or a declaration of ownership. It was a promise. A promise that they would not be alone anymore, that he would help them, and that he would protect them as part of his life. The woman's eyes softened, and for the first time in days she allowed herself to breathe more easily. She saw the sincerity in his expression, the steadiness in his actions, and the lack of judgment in his words. The children began to relax, sensing that this stranger might actually be a friend. It was a small but important step towards safety and trust. That night, as they slept in the cabin, the rancher stayed awake for a while, watching over them. He thought about how life had a way of surprising even the most cautious hearts. He had lived alone for years, believing that solitude was safety. Yet here were 5 children and a woman who had walked through unimaginable hardship. And somehow, they had brought warmth and life into his quiet world. He realized that sometimes helping others was not just about generosity. It was about connection, about forming bonds that made life richer and more meaningful. In the days that followed, the rancher continued to help them adjust to life on the ranch. He showed them where the fresh water was, helped the children learn small chores, and taught them how to care for the animals. The mother worked alongside him, her strength evident in every task she performed. Slowly, trust began to grow. They laughed together, shared meals, and began to understand that this place could be a new beginning. Despite the challenges, a sense of belonging began to form. The rancher, who had lived alone for so long, discovered the joy of shared responsibility and companionship. The woman, who had carried the weight of the world on her shoulders, found relief in having someone to help share the burden. And the children, once exhausted and fearful, began to smile again, finding comfort in safety and care. The first meeting, that moment when the rancher said, "Now there are 6 of us," became a memory they would all carry forever. It marked the beginning of a journey not just of survival, but of family, of trust, and of hope. It was proof that kindness could appear in the most unexpected places, and that courage and compassion could create bonds stronger than blood. Life on the ranch was still challenging, but now, with a shared purpose, every difficulty felt more manageable. They were no longer alone in the world. And as the sun rose over the plains, casting golden light across the fields, the rancher, the woman and her children took their first steps together toward a future that promised safety, love, and belonging. Life on the ranch was not easy. Even though the woman and her children had found a safe place to rest, the work was hard, and the adjustments were many. The rancher had lived alone for years and had developed routines that were familiar and unchanging. Suddenly, his quiet life became busy with the sounds of children, laughter, questions, and occasional cries. He had expected some challenges, but nothing had prepared him for the energy, curiosity, and needs of 5 young children. The woman was determined to make this place a home for her family. She moved with quiet efficiency, showing the children how to help with chores while also teaching them how to respect the land and the animals. She wanted to show them that life could still be beautiful, even after all the hardships they had endured. The rancher watched her closely. He was impressed by her strength, her patience, and the way she handled difficulties without complaint. There was a quiet dignity in her movements, a steady courage that inspired him more than he expected. The first challenge was food. The rancher had enough supplies for himself, but feeding 6 people instead of 1 required planning and effort. The woman helped by gathering fresh herbs and vegetables from the land, and showing the children how to cook simple meals. The rancher, who was used to eating quickly and alone, now found himself joining in family meals, learning to slow down and enjoy the small moments. Even the youngest children, who had been fearful and shy, began to take part in the daily routines, learning the names of animals, the proper way to handle tools, and the importance of working together. Language and culture were another challenge. The woman spoke little of the rancher's language, and the children understood even less. At first, communication was difficult, and misunderstandings were common. But over time, simple words, gestures, and shared experiences began to bridge the gap. The rancher learned a few words of the woman's language, and she taught him simple phrases. The children laughed at the funny sounds and tried to repeat them, enjoying the novelty of learning something new. Through patience and persistence, they slowly began to understand each other, creating a bond that was stronger than words. Trust, however, could not be rushed. The woman had been abandoned before, turned away by townspeople, and betrayed by people she thought were friends. She was cautious, always alert and careful about whom she allowed near her children. The rancher understood this and gave her the space and time she needed. He never forced her to speak, never rushed her to trust him. Instead, he worked alongside her, showing through actions rather than words that he could be relied upon. His patience gradually broke down the walls she had built around herself, brick by brick. There were small, everyday victories that strengthened their bond. The children learned to milk cows, feed chickens, and help with the garden. They laughed when animals misbehaved and celebrated when they completed tasks successfully. The woman smiled more often, her heart lightened by the laughter of children and the quiet support of the rancher. The rancher, too, found joy in seeing life return to his land. The ranch, once silent and lonely, was now filled with movement, sound, and a renewed sense of purpose. Yet, life was not without difficulty. Storms sometimes struck, flooding parts of the land and damaging fences. Animals got sick or went missing. The children occasionally argued or became frightened by the vastness of the plains at night. Each day brought a new problem to solve, and each night brought exhaustion. The woman and the rancher worked tirelessly, sometimes silently, sometimes talking softly about plans, concerns, and dreams. They learned to rely on each other in ways that neither had expected. Her strength and determination inspired him, and his steady presence gave her a sense of security she had not felt in years. As the weeks passed, the bond between the rancher and the woman began to deepen. They began to share small stories about their pasts, his life as a solitary man working the land, her struggles to care for her children and survive in a world that often rejected them. Though they did not speak often, each story brought understanding. Each shared meal, each moment of helping the children, created a connection that went beyond words. They were learning not just to live together, but to care for each other as partners in life's challenges. The children were key to this transformation. Their laughter and curiosity softened the rancher's heart, reminding him of the joys of family he had never fully experienced. He played simple games with them, helped them learn to read and write, and even told stories in the evenings by the fire. The woman watched these interactions carefully, seeing that her children were happy, safe, and learning in this new environment. Slowly, she began to relax, allowing herself to enjoy these moments rather than focusing solely on survival. One day, a situation tested their trust and unity. A wild horse had wandered onto the property, frightened and dangerous. The children were curious and wanted to approach it, but the woman immediately warned them to stay back. The rancher calmly guided them to safety while he approached the horse carefully, using his knowledge and experience to calm it down. Together, they managed to lead the horse back into the corral without anyone getting hurt. This small but tense incident showed them the power of working together, trusting each other's skills and protecting one another. It was a lesson in courage, patience, and collaboration that none of them would forget. As time went on, life began to settle into a rhythm. Each day had tasks, challenges, and small joys. The children woke early to help with chores. The woman prepared meals and taught lessons about nature and survival, and the rancher tended the land and animals. They learned to anticipate each other's needs, to offer help without being asked, and to share responsibilities in a way that made life smoother and more fulfilling. The ranch, once a place of solitude, had become a home filled with activity, learning, and love. Evenings were a special time. After the work was done, they would gather around the fire. The woman would tell stories of her ancestors, sharing wisdom and lessons from generations past. The rancher would add stories of his own life, sharing memories and reflections. The children listened eagerly, sometimes interrupting with questions, sometimes sitting quietly, absorbing every word. These moments were more than storytelling. They were the creation of family bonds, the weaving of lives together, and the building of trust and love that would last for years. There were also quiet, personal moments that spoke volumes. The rancher noticed the woman's small acts of care, how she prepared the children's meals, checked their clothing for rips, and comforted them when they were scared. He began to understand that family was not only about blood, it was about care, protection, and commitment. She, in turn, saw his quiet kindness, the way he watched over them without being asked, the way he took responsibility for their safety, and the way he included them in his daily life. Slowly, admiration and respect began to grow into a deeper feeling, though neither spoke of it directly. As weeks turned into months, their lives became intertwined in ways that neither could have imagined. The rancher, once alone and distant, found joy in sharing his life, skills, and land with others. The woman, once cautious and weary, found trust, support, and hope for the future. The children thrived, learning, laughing, and growing in a safe environment. What had started as a risky decision to take in a mother and her children had blossomed into something far greater, a family built not by blood but by courage, compassion, and shared experience. Yet they knew that life would not always be easy. Challenges still awaited, and the world beyond the ranch could be harsh and unforgiving. But together, they had proven that they could face difficulties, protect one another, and find joy in even the simplest moments. Their trust, once tentative, had become strong. Their bonds, once uncertain, had become unbreakable. And as they looked across the plains from their home, they understood that the hardest part of life had been behind them, and that a new chapter, one filled with hope, love, and family, was just beginning. Life on the ranch began to feel more like a real home, but it was not without its challenges. The days were long and the work never stopped. There were fences to repair, animals to feed, and crops to tend. The weather could be harsh, with sudden storms that destroyed hours of work or long, dry spells that threatened the land. Yet despite these difficulties, the woman, the rancher, and the children found ways to face each day together, slowly becoming a real family in the process. The woman proved to be an incredible teacher. She showed the children not just how to work, but how to observe the land and understand it. She taught them to watch the sky for signs of weather, to recognize which plants were safe to eat, and how to find water in dry areas. The children listened carefully, their curiosity growing with each lesson. Even the rancher learned from her. He had lived on the land for years, but he had never thought deeply about some of the small lessons she shared. He began to see the world in new ways, noticing details he had overlooked, and he admired her wisdom and patience. The children were thriving. The oldest daughter helped her mother with the younger children and learned to cook simple meals. The boys learned to handle animals carefully, and the youngest, though still small, began to enjoy playing with the other children near the ranch. Laughter and excitement filled the once quiet ranch. Even the rancher, who had been used to silence, found himself smiling more, listening to the children's questions and taking joy in their accomplishments. Despite this growing happiness, there were moments of tension. The family still faced outsiders who were not always welcoming. Some townspeople were suspicious of the woman and her children. Rumors and whispers sometimes reached the ranch, and it reminded the woman of the danger that existed in the wider world. She remained cautious, teaching her children to be careful and observant, and she never let her guard down completely. The rancher, understanding her fear, stood by her side, ready to protect them at any moment. Their partnership, forged through shared work and mutual respect, had become strong, and they relied on each other to face challenges. One day, a serious problem arose. A neighboring rancher accused the family of letting cattle stray onto his land. He was angry and demanding, threatening to take legal action. The woman's heart sank, fearing that they could be forced to leave. She had already lost so much, and the thought of losing this safe place was unbearable. The rancher, however, remained calm. He approached the situation with patience, speaking respectfully to the neighbor and showing proof that they had always cared for their animals properly. The situation was tense, but through careful words and honest actions, they were able to resolve the conflict. It was a hard lesson for the children, showing them that life could be unfair, but courage and patience could solve problems. In addition to outside challenges, there were moments of personal growth within the family. The woman began to trust the rancher completely, seeing in him not only a protector but a partner. They shared quiet moments when work was done, talking about their pasts, dreams, and hopes for the future. Though they did not speak of love directly at first, the way they looked at each other and helped one another showed a bond that was deepening with each passing day. The rancher admired the woman's strength and resilience, while she respected his calm, steady presence and his willingness to take responsibility for all of them. The children were also learning lessons about teamwork and compassion. They had begun to understand that family meant sharing responsibilities, helping each other, and protecting one another. When one of the younger children became sick, the others took on extra work without complaint. When a fence broke or an animal got lost, they all worked together to fix the problem. Each day brought new challenges, but it also brought opportunities to grow closer and learn more about each other. The ranch had become a classroom, a playground, and a home all at once. Evenings were a time of reflection and storytelling. Around the fire, the woman shared stories from her childhood, tales of bravery, survival, and wisdom passed down through generations. The rancher added his own stories, sharing memories of his life on the land, the hardships he had faced, and the lessons he had learned. The children listened intently, asking questions and offering their own thoughts. These moments strengthened the bond between them, teaching lessons not only about life but also about love, resilience, and the importance of family. There were small celebrations too. When a crop grew successfully, when a calf was born healthy, or when a child learned a new skill, they celebrated together. These moments of joy were simple but meaningful, reinforcing the sense of belonging and pride in what they had accomplished. The rancher had never imagined that his life could be filled with so much laughter and warmth. The woman had never imagined that she and her children could feel so safe, cared for, and part of something larger than themselves. As the seasons changed, so did their lives. Winter brought cold winds and snow, and the family had to work together to keep warm and protect the animals. Spring brought new growth, new life, and renewed hope. Each season was a challenge and a blessing, teaching them resilience, patience, and the beauty of life cycles. The rancher and the woman grew closer, relying on each other not just for survival but for emotional support, guidance, and companionship. The children began to dream again. They talked about school, adventures, and the things they wanted to learn. The woman encouraged them, sharing her own hopes and dreams while supporting theirs. The rancher helped make their dreams possible, finding ways to teach them skills they would need for life and encouraging curiosity and learning. The ranch, once a place of solitude, had become a place of growth, hope, and opportunity. Despite all the progress, the family knew that challenges would continue. Life was never easy, and there would always be obstacles to face. Yet through hard work, trust, and love, they had proven that they could overcome difficulties together. They had created a life built not just on survival, but on compassion, partnership, and the courage to keep moving forward no matter what. The ranch had become a home in the truest sense, a place of safety, love, and belonging. One day, as the woman and the rancher worked together in the field, she looked at him and smiled, a silent acknowledgement of all they had achieved together. The rancher smiled back, feeling a deep sense of pride and gratitude. They had taken a chance on each other, faced every challenge side by side, and built a life that none of them had imagined possible. The children ran around them, laughing and playing, and the sound of their voices filled the air with joy. The woman knew that life would never be completely free of hardship, but she had learned that family could create a strength stronger than fear or loneliness. The rancher knew that he had found something more important than land or work. He had found a family, a connection, and a purpose that gave meaning to every day. Together they had transformed not just the ranch, but their hearts, creating a life filled with hope, love, and the promise of many better days to come. As the sun set over the plains, casting a warm glow over the ranch, the family gathered together, feeling a sense of peace that had once seemed impossible. The woman held her children close, the rancher stood beside them, and for the first time in a long time, they all felt truly safe, loved, and at home. It was a feeling that would stay with them forever, a reminder that even in the face of great challenges, courage, compassion, and trust could build a life full of meaning, hope, and happiness. Life on the ranch had changed profoundly since the day the woman and her children had arrived. What had once been a quiet, solitary place was now alive with movement, laughter, and the sounds of life. The rancher had grown accustomed to the daily rhythms of family, and the woman had found strength not only in herself, but in the shared life they had created together. The children were thriving, learning about the land, animals, and the values of hard work, honesty, and compassion. Every day brought new lessons, small victories, and moments of joy that reminded them of the beauty and resilience of life. The family faced challenges, as life never offered complete ease. There were times when storms destroyed fences or crops, and when sickness or injury required careful attention and quick thinking. Outside the ranch, some people still looked at the woman and her children with suspicion, forgetting how they had struggled to survive and rebuild their lives. Yet the rancher, now fully committed to his new family, stood firm. He defended them with calm determination, using reason, patience, and courage to navigate conflicts and protect the people he cared about. In this way, the ranch became not only a home but a sanctuary, a place where safety and trust reigned over fear and prejudice. The children grew in confidence and happiness. They learned to ride horses, care for animals, and tend the land. They laughed freely, played together, and supported one another in daily chores. They learned lessons not from books alone, but from lived experience, lessons about kindness, responsibility, teamwork, and respect for others. The woman encouraged them, teaching not just survival skills but moral lessons about compassion and empathy. The rancher, once a solitary man, found himself teaching lessons too, using his experience to guide the children through challenges and impart practical wisdom. Together, they shaped a childhood full of learning, love, and stability. The bond between the rancher and the woman deepened over time. Through shared labor, quiet conversations, and moments of vulnerability, they developed a trust that was unshakable. Each recognized the other's strengths, her courage, resourcefulness, and nurturing nature, his steadiness, patience, and willingness to protect and provide. They learned to support one another in ways that transcended words. Sometimes, a glance was enough to understand a concern or a need. Sometimes, Silence carried the comfort that no words could convey. Their partnership became the foundation of the family, a steady support that allowed everyone to flourish. There were also moments of reflection and celebration. Birthdays, small accomplishments on the ranch, or the simple completion of a day's work became occasions to come together, share stories, and appreciate one another. The family began to realize that their lives were no longer dictated by fear or past suffering. Instead, they were defined by courage, compassion, and the choices they made together. The rancher watched the children grow with pride. The woman observed their learning and laughter with joy, and the children, in turn, felt the security of belonging to a family that loved and protected them. Challenges continued to test their unity, but each difficulty strengthened their bond. When a wild animal threatened the ranch or when a storm caused damage, they faced it together, pooling their skills, courage, and determination. Each problem became an opportunity to teach the children resilience, cooperation, and the value of standing together. They learned that life could be unpredictable and unfair, but with love, trust, and perseverance, they could overcome even the hardest obstacles. One day, a situation arose that tested the family's courage and unity in a new way. A fire broke out near the edge of the property, threatening the fields and the livestock. The rancher immediately sprang into action, organizing the children and woman to help move animals to safety and clear flammable materials. Smoke filled the air and heat pressed down on them, but they worked tirelessly together, their movements coordinated, their minds focused, and their hearts determined to protect their home. The woman remained calm under pressure, guiding the children with steady hands and firm instructions. The rancher worked alongside them, leading efforts and offering reassurance. By the end of the day, the fire was contained, no lives were lost, and the family had faced the danger together. The experience left them exhausted, but it also left them stronger, more united, and more confident in their ability to face anything as a family. The children, once fearful and uncertain, had become brave and capable. They learned not only practical skills, but also the emotional strength needed to handle adversity. They saw in their parents an example of courage, patience, and selflessness, and they internalized these lessons. The ranch, once a place of survival, had become a school of life, teaching them values that would remain with them forever. Laughter, learning, and love filled the spaces that had once been empty and lonely. The woman and the rancher also discovered the profound joy of partnership. They shared not only responsibilities, but also dreams for the future. They discussed improvements to the ranch, plans for education and growth for the children, and the hope of building a life that could endure beyond them. In these conversations, trust and mutual respect deepened, as they learned that life could be richer when shared with someone who truly cared. The woman's strength complemented the rancher's steadiness, and together they created an environment where love, safety, and hope could thrive. Through the years, the family grew closer. The children became more independent yet remained connected, understanding the importance of family bonds. They celebrated successes and comforted each other in times of difficulty. They understood that a family is built not just through shared blood, but through shared experience, mutual care, and unwavering support. Each challenge they overcame together strengthened their connection, and each moment of joy deepened their appreciation for the life they had built. The rancher often reflected on the day the woman and her children had arrived. At the time, it had seemed like a small act of kindness, a decision made on impulse or instinct. Yet, that decision had transformed his life, bringing love, laughter, and meaning where there had been only solitude. For the woman, the rancher had become more than a helper. He was a partner, a protector, and a source of stability that allowed her to breathe, rest, and finally feel safe. For the children, he was a father figure, a teacher, and a constant presence they could rely on. As the family sat together one evening, watching the sun set over the plains. A sense of peace settled over them. They had faced hardship, danger, and uncertainty, but they had endured. They had created a life where love and trust triumphed over fear and isolation. The woman held her children close, the rancher stood beside them, and for the first time in a long time, they felt truly whole. The firelight reflected in their eyes, illuminating not just their faces but their hearts. A family forged not by circumstance, but by choice, courage, and unwavering compassion. The story of the woman, her children, and the rancher became a testament to the power of love, resilience, and human connection. It showed that even in the most difficult circumstances, a life of hope and meaning could be created. Their journey had not been easy, but each challenge had taught them lessons about trust, patience, and courage. Each moment of shared work, laughter, and care had strengthened the bonds between them, creating a family united in ways that went beyond blood. Years later, when the children were grown and the ranch had flourished under their care and guidance, the woman and the rancher would reflect on how far they had come. They had turned a small, lonely ranch into a home filled with life, love, and laughter. The children had grown into responsible, compassionate individuals, carrying with them the lessons learned on the plains. And the rancher and the woman had found in each other not only love, but the profound satisfaction of building a family that could endure, thrive, and inspire. The final lesson of their story was simple yet profound. Family is not always born. It is made through courage, compassion, and commitment. It is built in the quiet moments of care, in the shared burdens, and in the joy of seeing others grow and thrive. The woman, the rancher, and the children had created a life that proved this truth, showing that even after great hardship, hope could flourish, love could grow, and lives could be transformed by kindness, resilience, and trust. And so, the ranch, once quiet and solitary, became a place of warmth, laughter, and belonging. The woman had found safety and love. The children had found security and guidance. The rancher had found family and purpose. Together they had faced the world, survived its trials, and created a life that was truly their own. And as the sun set each evening over the plains, it cast a golden light over a family that had been made strong not by circumstance, but by choice, love, and the courage to embrace life together.